Hey guys, I'm back with another video, and in this video we'll talk about one issue with pre-rendering in Blazor. So let me show you what the issue is first. So it's Blazor web app. I'm selecting it, Blazor web app, and let's say Blazor pre-rendering state persistence, something like this, persistence. Next, .NET 8 authentication type none. Interactivity, I'm adding server interactive location per page. Create, and project got created. So in this, if I run it, first let me go to the components pages, and we have this weather.razor page. Let me come here, zoom it, and on this page let's add render mode, render mode any interactivity. We have enabled interactive server, so let's use interactive server, but it will be same for interactive WebAssembly, InteractiveAuto, all the interactive modes. So I'm running it. Maybe before that, let me add a breakpoint on this OnInitialized async method. I have added this breakpoint. Let's run it. Let's go to weather page. Breakpoint got hit, OnInitialized async. I'll continue it, and breakpoint got hit again on this OnInitialized async. Now it will be fine. Let's try it one more time on home page. Now I'll moving to weather first. Then if I run it, continue it, then again. So this on initialized async, this method gets executed twice. The reason is for all the interactivity in Blazor, whether it is interactive server, interactive WebAssembly, or interactive auto, the pre-rendering is by default enabled. So what the pre-rendering is, when this component first we are trying to execute this component, what it does, it first executes this component on the server before coming to the client. It executes this. So OnInitialize is part of that execution. It executes it, generates everything, and then response gets back to the client, and on client it again tries to execute the same component. So it again executes this on initialized async and all these things. This is called hydration. So that's why first this method gets called on server, then second time it gets called on the client in the browser. So now if we have some expensive logic, in this case we have a delay and we are generating these weather forecasts. So this is fine because this is a simple we have a list of these summaries. Then we are simply fetching 5 random weather, so this is fine. But what if we were fetching data from database, or we were computing some heavy operation, or maybe we were fetching some data from some API? Okay, or maybe we could have some let's say maybe some page view kind of logic, so let's say I have a blog application. In that I have one feature which shows that how many times this particular blog has been viewed by the users. So in that case, what would happen if I come to this page? So I have that logic inside its own initialized async. So for one page view, this current setup, this will actually count 2 page views, because first it will execute on server, then it will come to the client, and on client it will execute again and it will add one more page view. But that is not the case. So for this we have two approaches. First approach is we can disable this pre-rendering. How can we disable it? We can change how we have this interactive server. So we can say new interactive server render mode, or what's that render mode interactive server? Okay. And in this, we can set pre-render to false because this takes this parameter pre-render in this constructor. So default value is true. If we do not provide anything, it will consider this true. This is the default which we just shown. Now we can set this pre-rendering to false. Now if we do this, what would happen? This OnInitialized async, this will not execute on the server. It will directly come to the client and it will execute on client only. Let's run it and let's see. If I go to weather, breakpoint got it, continue, and we have the data. Now this uh, disabling pre-render, that is not always the case. Maybe if we want this component to be let's say SEO friendly, in that case this is not going to work. What I mean is, first let's let me cut this. Let's have pre-rendering enabled. So we have that interactive server. Let's run it and I want to show you something. It is here. Let's go to the weather, continue, continue. We have this data. Now if I open the page source, it again come here. This is fine. Now if you see, we have that this component demonstrates showing data, loading, and then this. And after that, this Blazor SSR template weather. And then we have this H1 demonstrates showing data. And after that, we have this table. Let me zoom it. We have this table. You see this table where we have all this data. That means this is going to be on the page source. So the SEO crawlers, those can come here, crawler bots, and those will find the data here. So it will be SEO friendly. Now, if we disable this pre-rendering, if we set pre-render to false, now if we run it, what is going to happen? It will not execute on the server. So there is nothing on this page on server. Whether continue, continue, and now if I go to view source, you see we have, there's nothing actually. Article, this, and there is no data. Because now we have pre-rendering false, that means everything is going to run in the browser only. So how it will work? It will simply give this blank page on the UI, and on UI we have this interactive server. So it will create, establish a new signaler connection, and then it will go to the server, execute it on the server, and it will get the data from there. And if it was interactive WebAssembly, then interactive WebAssembly, that WebAssembly will be there, and then it will make HTTP call or whatever way we will get the data, then it will fetch data from there. So now this way we can disable it. But what if we want to enable pre-rendering, but we do not want this operation to be performed twice? So for that we have an option. So first let's go back to the initial approach, but I'll comment this line out. I'll have it like interactive server. And then what we can do, Blazor gives us one thing, which is inject. We have persist component state. This this is a class which Blazor gives us. Let's call it component state only. Component state. So we can use this component state. And how can we use this? So here on this component state, we have a method that is register on persisting. Okay, so how this works, it says register a callback to persist the component state when the application is about to be paused. Registered callback can use this opportunity to persist the state so that it can be retrieved when the application resumes. So what this paused and resume states? So first let's understand this. When we have pre-rendering enabled, so how it works, when it first got hit, it will execute this component on the server. It will do everything. After that, it will pause the state. It will come to the client and then it will resume the state. So in that period, when we have paused and resumed state, at that time, when we are pausing the state, when it is Blazor is pausing that state, at that time, we can have some data. Okay. And then when it is resuming the state, that means when it came to the client and it will trying to initialize the state, at that time we can reuse that same data which we already had when application was going to be paused. That means it is a kind of small cache. So we can use when we can have our logic in this register on persisting, we can cache some data, and when the application resuming, that means it is coming to the client, then we can reuse that cached data. That is what it means. Okay. Now we check what this takes. It takes a callback. Render mode, we are not concerned about this right now. So it takes a func delegate which returns a task. So here we can have our logic, whatever logic we want to have in here. So the logic is going to be, for our case, what we need to do, we have this forecast data. Okay. So we will use this forecast data. And how can we use this? For this, we can say component state dot persist as JSON. So we have this method on this component state. Here we can provide our key. So I'll call it name of forecast only. And then we can provide value. Value is going to be forecast. And one thing to note here, this value should be JSON serializable. We have this, and then we'll say return task dot completed task. We are good. Now there is one thing, this callback, it returns persisting component state subscription. So whenever we are dealing with any subscription, we should dispose that subscription. Okay, so let's store this inside a variable persisting component state subscription. So here we'll say private persisting component state subscription. Okay, so let's call it subscription, and we'll store this inside this subscription. Now whenever this component got disposed, we need to subscription we need to dispose this subscription. Okay, so for this what we'll do, we will simply say that this component implements iDisposable, and when we have iDisposable, we need to have a public void dispose method, and inside this we will be disposing this. So let's add this nullable check as well. Cannot be applied on this because this is not nullable, so let's have it nullable like this, and we are good. Now let's see. Now we have this component register on persisting, and this is going to be called only when we are this Blazor is trying to pause the state. That means when it is after rendering this component on the server, when it is coming back to the client, at that time it is going to call this. Now what if it is calling it? So now we will need to use this data. So for this, what we can do, on this component state, we have try take from JSON method. So it says try to retrieve persisted state as JSON with the given key. Okay, and so try take from JSON key which we provided in persist at JSON line number 53. We'll use the same key. like this, because this is try text, so we need to have out var, and we could say forecast. In this case, maybe stored forecast, something like this. What is the issue? Try take from JSON out t value instance. Try take string out t value required parameter of instance. There is no argument given. I am giving the argument. Okay, it is not able to guess the type. Okay, so we can use the same type like this, and it is good now. Now, if we got this data, that means we are in the client mode. What we'll do, we'll simply say that forecast, which is this field which our HTML template is using, we will set it to the data we fetched from the state. We will have it like this. That was not the case. If it could not get the data, then what we'll do, we will have our complete logic like this. Okay, so now we are good. Now let's add couple of breakpoints and let's see what is happening here. Add one here on initialize async, then I will have one in register on persisting method. Then we'll check if it is coming to if or else which method. So let's run it. We have interactive server. Yes, let's run it. It came here. Let me fix the zoom. Whether now it is on server. If I continue, subscription is fine. After that, it is trying to get the data from this component state, but right now it does not have that data because it is running for the first time on the server. So we do not have that weather forecast data. So it came to else. We have this task.delay, we have everything, we have data in forecast. Then we will continue. Then it came to this register on persisting. Now what is happening? Now it is going to pause the app state. It will go to the client. So now we already have forecast data and it will add this data to this component state with this key. If we do this, return, and everything is fine. Now this OnInitializing now app came to the client. Now it is going to call this method again. Now let's see what is happening. We have subscription, that is fine. Now it came to this if, because now if we have this forecast data with this key in our component state. So it will come here and we will get this data, we will assign to this forecast and we will get out from this on initializing. Now we will have the same data. So now we executed this logic only once on the server. Now this could be some HTTP call, API call, some expensive operation. It could be anything, but we are sure now that it will be executed only once, that too on the server only. So that is how we can get around with this pre-rendering issue, which executes on initialize async method twice. Now there is one thing, this thing, we need to do this again and again if we have multiple components, right? We could have one more component where we will have the same interactive server with pre-rendering enabled. Interactive server WebAssembly auto does not matter. This thing is common for all. And this is not specific to .NET 8. It was there in previous Blazor versions as well, .NET 5, .NET 6. But this persist component state, this came out, I think, in .NET 6. It was not in .NET 5. But this pre-rendering was always there. We just need to enable this explicitly, but in .NET 8 pre-rendering is enabled by default. That's the only change. Cool. So now what we can do, this logic we need to do it again and again. So what I approach this, instead of doing this in component level, what I usually do, I create a new class. Let me first stop it, or maybe I'll call it a base component or base page, because this is specific to pages, routable pages. And this should be a subclass of base component base. What is that? Component base. Okay. So on this component base, I'm going to have a property first of type the same persist component state. Persist component state. Let's call it application state, and we'll inject this. Okay. Now what I do, I simply have a method here. So we'll say protected void, and I call this not void, it should be protected t result get or add state. T result, I make it generic so that it can be used with any type of data throughout our application for all our pages. Now it will take two things. First, it will take a string key, and then func of task of t result, and we'll say add state factory. Okay. Now in this first thing, we'll have a default data. So that we'll say t result data equals, let's say, default, default, and we'll return this data. Now inside this, what we'll do, this is not typed result, this is t result. So in this, the logic we are going to use, that will be application state dot same thing which we have in here. So here we'll say register on persisting dot register on persisting. We'll have some this logic where we need to have this thing. So application state dot persist at JSON, and key we are getting from the client, from the consumer of this method. This is key. So we'll use this key here. And then this data forecast, this is going to be this data. Okay. Now after this, we will check the same thing. If application state dot try take from JSON t result key out, we can use data, or we can explicitly say var stored data, and this is going to be t result. We can remove it from here if we want. Application state try get from JSON, not try get, it should be try take from JSON. Okay, now we have the stored data. Now what will happen? It should be in a label. This should be in a label, and this should be in a label. Cool. And this should be in a label as well. Fine. If we have that stored data in here, what we'll do, we'll say data equal this stored data. If that's not the case, okay, then what we'll do, we'll simply say data equals, we have this add state factory, right? The way by which we can fetch that data. So for this, we'll say var await add state factory dot invoke. So for this should be async, that means this should be a task of this. Now we have data, after that we are returning the data. So this is the same logic we had in this weather dot razor in here. Now what we can do, instead of doing all this, let me copy this method on initialize async. comment this out here for a reference. Then I'll do one more thing. I'll remove everything. And then this page, it should inherit, we'll say inherits from this base page. Now when we are inheriting from base page, we can directly call this get or state method, get or add state method. How we can do this? We'll come here inside this OnInitialized async. We'll say forecast equals await get or add state. Okay. First we need to pass a key. So we'll say name of forecast and then async and then the add state factory, which is going to be this logic. The only thing which needs to change now is in this we were directly setting this forecast. Now we cannot directly set this. What we need to do, we need to return this data. We will return this data and it will come back to this and it will be set to this forecast. So now this approach and this approach, these two are identical, same. So this is how now this method, this get or state method on the base page, this is reusable. We can reuse it for other components as well. And as well as let's say maybe we had some other piece of data as well. We have this forecast, we maybe have some list of dates, list of some other data also. So then the only thing which we had to do, let's say maybe let's say forecast forecast, something like this. If this was also here, we could have simply say other forecast equals simply await get or add state name of that other forecast and then simply add logic. How can we fetch the other forecast? Logic to fetch other forecast, something like this, and then we'll return the other forecast. This is of type this weather forecast, so we could say task dot from result. We'll say array dot empty. For now I'm doing this, but you could have your logic. Async await like this. Okay, so now we simply reuse this method. We don't have to handle all those things and add this try get from try take from JSON, persist at JSON again and again for all these. And we could reuse the same for other components as well. The only thing, those should inherit from this base page. Now first let me show you how it is working. So I'll have a breakpoint here. I'll have a breakpoint on this get or add state. Let's continue. This section will execute only once, not twice. We'll see this. So, okay, I'll move to the weather page. We are on initializing. Right now it is running on server. I'll continue. It came here. It is going to execute this logic. Continue. It came back to this on initialized async. Again, now this is on client. Now if we continue, it simply passes it. It is not going to execute this because right now we have that state stored in our component state in this get or add state using this application state try take from JSON. We can continue and we are good. We have this data. Okay, now there is one missing piece. Let me show you that as well. That missing piece is, if you remember in our earlier implementation, this register on persisting, this was returning an subscription. And if we have some subscription, to avoid memory leaks, we should always dispose that subscription. Okay, now let's do this as well. We'll come here. We will have the same thing here. Private persisting component state subscription. This underscore subscription. We'll have this subscription here. Subscription equals this. And now on this base page, we could say let's implement iDisposable. implement the interface, we have this dispose method. We'll say underscore subscription dot dispose, and we are good. You will say we are good, but we are not good. Now we need to understand what the problem with this approach is. For component level, this was fine, but for base page, this is not fine. The problem now is if you check this new implementation on Initialized, we have first forecast. We are using this get or state method, get or add state. It will come here. It will simply come here. It will set this subscription, continue. And when it will come to this other forecast, what it will do, it will going to call the same get or add state method. Here what we are doing, we are simply setting this register on persisting on this subscription. Now what would happen, it will discard the previous subscription, it will use this new subscription, it will override this. That is not what we want, right? So now what we can do, instead of using this single subscription, this we will have a list of subscriptions. Okay, so we could say something like maybe I list of subscriptions. This will say subscriptions. We can have new list of subscriptions. This persisting components with subscription like this. Okay, now what we can do, whenever we are coming here, we will simply say this subscriptions dot add, and we can have this directly inside this. Now this is not nullable. Okay, now what we are doing, whenever we are calling this get or add state, we are simply adding a new subscription to this subscriptions list. Now we have the list of subscriptions. We could have it read only. Okay, now we have list of subscriptions. Now inside this dispose method, we will need to modify this logic the way we are disposing this. For this, what we'll do, we will check if subscription maybe dot any, or we could check the count. If this is greater than 0, and this is count property, not count method. So any method we should use over the count method, but this is simple count on this I collection, so it will be direct fetch. There is no logic, so we can use count without any performance issue. Okay, now we know that subscriptions is not we have some subscription. Then we can simply say for each was subscription in underscore subscriptions, and here we'll say subscription dot dispose. All the subscriptions are going to be disposed. Now we have everything in place. It will now it is perfect. It is handling all the cases. We can use it multiple times on the same component or from multiple components. It will going to work. Let's try it one more time if everything works fine. We are here, weather, we are here. Let's add the breakpoints here as well and in dispose method. Continue. We came here get or add state. This time the key is forecast. That means the first case. We'll come here, we'll add it, we'll continue. Logic is executing. It again came here from the client for the other forecast. Now client for the first time, client for the second time, and we are good. Now if we go back from this page, this is not disposing. Maybe it is having this, but this logic is fine. Whenever this page is going to be disposed, we are going to dispose these subscriptions, all these subscriptions. So this is how we could get around with this pre-rendering issue for multiple times data fetching. All right, so I think that's all for this video. Okay, so please do let me know in the comment if you learned something new, if you already knew about this. Ideally this pre-rendering should have been disabled, or maybe this thing should have been automatically implemented by Blazor team, but I can see the problem is I could have anything inside this on initialization, right? But maybe there could have been some simpler approach. For this we need to do a lot of things, but this works. All right, and this source code you are going to get it free. Just the link is going to be in the description. You can get the source code for free. Please like this video, share this video, subscribe my channel. I'll be back soon with some other video. Till then, bye bye.